of advice would you give players looking to play college soccer on picking the right fit school for them?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the word fit. I think that's kind of the most important thing to start thinking about early is, and I think there's a lot of different layers to it. It's academically, I think sometimes we put that second, but we're thinking academically, what do I want to achieve during my time at college or university? So is it a major? Is it the, academic profile, all those types of things. Then I think there's the fit of the different schools. Do I want a smaller private school? Do I want a larger public school? All the things in between. But again, kind of another layer of fit. And then I think, soccer is the driving force for so many young soccer players, which is great. Then I think it's starting to figure out what do I want out of my soccer experience? Do I want to go to a school where I feel like I have a chance to compete right away? Do I want to go to a school that plays in a certain conference? Do I want to go Division I, Division II, Division III? I think you really can't start early enough kind of in your high school career, starting to think about those fit questions and kind of the three big layers, the academics, the school size, things like that. And then the soccer piece of it, I think is really where you've got to spend a lot of your time thinking about that fit question.
Yeah, definitely. And so a lot of the players that I talk to, they know that coaches can't reach out to them, or at the D1 level at least, until their junior year. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're dead set that they want to play Division I soccer, and that you can't even talk to them till their junior year. So they're not even going to start that process and completely focus on what they're doing on the field. What would you say to those players?
Yeah, I think that's not a bad focus. I think, while we can't respond in Division I till a certain day, we can always receive emails. And I think so I think when you're really focused on the field, one, you've got to, are you working hard? Are you developing your game? Are you listening to your coaches? Are you doing all of those things to help yourself grow as a player? Because I think sometimes, we got to remember that in the end, once you get to the school, you've got to earn your right on the field, do those things. And so you've got to make sure that, as they say, the proof's in the pudding. Are you putting the work in? But then outside of that, you got to start to think like, am I positioning myself to be seen by the schools that I want to be seen at? So whether that's certain showcases, whether that's certain leagues, whether that's certain ID camps. But I think, I think the guys, it's a pretty competitive world in men's soccer collegiately. And I think the ones that do the best have this sort of entrepreneurial sort of mindset to say like, all right, I'm going to make sure, like, even if the coach hasn't seen me yet, I'm going to make sure I get in front of the coaches that I want to get in front of. I'm not going to be passive. I'm going to go make it happen and really have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit behind them. I think are the ones that really succeed in finding the fit. Because there's one of me, I'm at a handful of places. We've got two other full-time assistants that are out, and we recruit as much as we can. But at the end of the day, we can't be everywhere all the time. And so I think you've got to kind of take the bull by the horns and say like, all right, this is what I want now. How do I make sure I get myself in front of those coaches during this process? And then no, you can always send me an email. I just can't write back until your junior year, that June 15th date.
So yeah, so let's say I write an email to you. I'm a high level player and I'm playing for a good league and I'm showcasing myself, playing well. How much attention do you give to those players, and are you reaching out to those players right away as soon as you're able to? How are you kind of managing that?
Yeah, I think when you go, when you go to events, you're always creating a list of the emails, and then you're always doing a quick glance. Even right now, sometimes it's difficult. You'll get the week before an event, you'll get 1,000 emails, and you might not be able to respond to everyone, but you try to make sure you filter through them and you create your list of who you're going to go watch at these events. So I definitely think it guides you that way. And then while you're at these events, you're obviously seeing other people, and if they catch your eye, you're taking notes and then following up with them. But I do think most good programs are hungry to find good players. We understand in soccer we can find those players anywhere. So you're always keeping an eye on that email inbox. And I think the content of those emails is important, given schedule updates, when you're going to be playing, where you're going to be playing, graduation year, For Notre Dame, GPA is going to be important to put an accurate GPA reflection. But the emails do, we might not be able to respond right away to everyone, but we are tracking them, putting them in our database, and making sure we're seeing the guys that we feel like have a good chance of being someone we would recruit.
Yeah, so I want to just point that out because a lot of the players that I talk to, they're like, coach is not getting back to me. Coach is not getting back to me. You're on their radar still. Just continue to follow up and make sure that you're staying within that database and letting them know that you're still interested. That's
Yeah,
really
exactly.
important. So let's say I position myself in the right league. I'm going to the right ID camps and I'm going to the right showcases and I'm getting in front of the college coaches that I want to play at. What's going to make me stand out? Are you looking for skill first and then the type of person that they are? Are you looking for the type of person that they are and then the skill on the field, off the field? What do I need to show you first to catch your eye to stand out?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think always, because it's going to start first by watching kids, is going to be, is there something on the field that sort of catches your eye that'll fit into your team over the next few years? And at Notre Dame, one of the things that we look for first is like your decision making on the ball, because we find if you're making what we think are the right decisions with the ball, it usually means you understand the game. And if you understand the game, usually it means you can learn and kind of fit into the way we do things. And then you start to look at athletic profiles and things like that. But that's that first glance. You're like, ooh, he looks like a good player. You're excited about that. And then you get to that next piece, because you can't separate the soccer player from the person. Like, are they going to be that good fit into our team? Are they a team first kind of guy? Want to be a great teammate? So you will want to get to know the player as that next level. And then the thing that you have to know at Notre Dame and some of the more rigorous academic schools are, all right, do they have a chance of getting in? So you look at that academic profile to say, like, okay, are there someone that we can even talk to? And then I think if all of those things check off positively, then you start to say, how are we going to get to know the player? So that's when maybe we'll invite them to a camp, or we'll follow up and maybe try to go watch a training session, depending on what happens. But you do want to get to see them a couple of different times, and ideally in different environments, so you see how they adapt to different scenarios. Because when they come to college, it's going to be a completely different environment, and you want to recruit guys who ultimately are going to be successful for you. So I think that first look is soccer. Ooh, is there something that excites you about their game? For Notre Dame, a lot is like, what decisions are they making on the ball? And then you start to find those athletic profiles. Then you want to learn about them as a person. And then I think academics is always going to be the biggest hurdle at Notre Dame. So you want to find out quickly what type of student they are.
Okay, I just want to touch on the point that you just mentioned, right? You're not going to recruit a player off watching them one time. They scored an amazing goal at a showcase and you were just so happened to watch them. It's going to be the second, third, and fourth time that's really going to lock it in for you. Is that right?
100%, because I think our goal going through it a lot is like, you want everybody you recruit to be successful. And I think there's a certain amount of times you have to see a player playing and in different situations to really feel like who they are and what they might be able to do at your level. Like, I think for a pro example, it's like, a lot of guys, think they're going to get bought after having a great World Cup, right? But at the end of the day, most of the times you can get hot for a month at a World Cup, but it's going to be what you're doing day in and day out. And I think for us, it's that same idea of like, okay, like you said, it could be a 15-minute glimpse. You're like, oh, that looks like, the next Thierry Henry or something. And then you want to watch them again, and you might find out they're not quite Thierry Henry.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you're mentioning a lot of good pieces within this. You want them to be successful, not just getting to Notre Dame or getting to college, but you want them while they're there to have success and then even beyond. So what are the things that college soccer can kind of provide players to help them within that next step in their career, whether it's to get drafted into the MLS, to go over to Europe, or just have a successful professional career?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think it's something that we offer, that universities and colleges for hundreds of years have been developing young people to go on to life afterwards. And I think it's something that is just embedded in most good universities, and especially at Notre Dame. I'm lucky to be here, where basically this whole place is here to set you up to grow as an 18 to 22-year-old. And so for us, it's a soccer player, person, and then academically, so that you're employable afterwards. But there is always that element of just growing up with people. And I think, specifically for soccer, like I think we're kidding ourselves if we don't think if you want to make it at the highest level of the game, you have to be mentally strong and mentally tough. And I think that's something that, the college grind does prepare guys. You still see guys on our World Cup roster that have played college soccer. It's not the only way, but I think, of course, we've got good coaches. The competition level in Division I soccer has never been higher. We're at a really good level there. But then I think it's that extra component of like, how are you functioning within a close-knit team, right? So you start to really be a team player. And then after the game, you've got to do homework. You've got to get up and you've got to do those things. And I think it just makes you a stronger person. And strong people are the ones that become pros for a long time, that win big trophies, all of those things. You're not winning the Champions League or MLS Cup without being mentally strong. And I think we can help with that a lot.
Definitely. Now, to go back into the recruiting piece, the communication, should that come from players directly? Should that come from the parents? Should that come from an outside source? What do college coaches prefer, or where do college coaches prefer that communication to come from?
Yeah, I think ideally it comes from the player. I get the appeal, but I think now it's so easy you're not printing off letters. It's easy to do the research. You don't need some sort of fancy looking email. I think it's always best when it comes from the player, and it's authentic, and it comes from a place of, hey, they're really interested in your school. Like, if someone emails me and they're like, oh, I'm really interested in Notre Dame. I want to, get my undergraduate teaching degree and certificate, and then it goes from there. And you're like, well, they haven't even done the research to see we don't give out, we don't have an undergraduate teaching major. So I think it's best if it comes from the player, from the student themselves. And, I think there's some sort of authentic reason they're interested in your program and your school is always the most helpful.
Yeah, so let's say you are interested in a player. How do you portray that to them? Like, what does that communication look like from you when you seriously are considering a player?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's pretty, you sort of want to get going in the process. It's pretty clear of like, it can be like, hey, we really enjoyed watching you play. We're excited to see you play again. If we ask you for your transcripts, that's usually a good start. Because again, that's going to be that first hurdle here is getting what we call a red, yellow, or green light from admissions. Green light's great. You got to keep working. Yellow light, which we can have sometimes, like, okay, looks good. Your schedule looks like we need to up the rigor a little bit. So maybe you need to take some AP classes. Or red light, which doesn't happen a ton because we sort of know it before we see it, as, okay, we can't recruit this person because they just haven't gotten the grades in high school so far. So that's the first big step for us. If we like you, we're going to get those transcripts, see if it's even a possibility. And then we'll usually say, okay, we saw that, like what we saw in the field, admissions like what they saw in the classroom, let's follow up with a phone call. And then that usually kicks off the process.
So at the higher levels at D1 college soccer, when should I be expecting to officially sign with, the team that I'm going to end up playing for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's changed a lot over the years. I think with the transfer portal the last few years, international recruiting, there's a kind of a variety of times. There's some schools that have what's called rolling admissions, and so they can sign players basically until classes start that year. At a place that like Notre Dame, we're not. Everybody's application has to be in January 1st of their senior year, and then usually our commitment to the student and their commitment to us, happens sometime, sort of junior year, fall, which is pretty early, through senior year, kind of starting of classes your senior years. That typical kind of year window. Depending on how things are going. But that's the typical one. But other schools could, be signing you in March of your senior year. So it's a pretty wide variety, but it depends a little bit just on the general admissions process of the school.
Yeah, so I wouldn't rule out, if I'm a senior or I'm a junior and haven't gotten that much attention that I'm really looking for, I obviously still have a chance of playing college
100%.
soccer.
100%. I think, we try as hard as we can to have spots ready, like going into this summer because, boys and men develop over time at different rates, and so there's always these big jumps over this kind of 18 months for young soccer players. So we want to make sure we're not missing out on someone because we're committing players too early.
Will that change with the roster spots being decreased from NCAA over the past year?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a great point to bring up. I think going down to 28 roster spots, so there's going to be this log jam here for a couple of years where you've had COVID, so guys were playing until they were basically retiring from, working. And then you have the transfer portal, so guys are moving around a little bit more. You have an influx of international students. So it's been difficult, but I think that'll start to level itself out. And I think what we're working with a lot of players now is that creativity that maybe has been in college hockey for a few years, but are you doing a gap year? So, okay, maybe you didn't get the situation you wanted, but you're on the right track. Do you want to try to reclassify yourself from being a senior to a junior and do an extra year of high school? Is it maybe you're going to enroll mid-year somewhere, and so you're just doing like a gap semester? So I think there's different ways, but generally you have a year to play with before you start to lose any eligibility with when you decide to enter college.
Given that everything is so dynamic and complicated, like a lot of the players that you're recruiting, are they getting like mentors? Do they have help outside of this so that they can focus on what they need to do on the field while making sure that they're doing the right things off the field? Like, how are the players that you're recruiting navigating all of this chaotic, stuff?
I think it's a little bit, case by case. I think some clubs that are maybe well funded have kind of college liaisons that can help them think through this process. Some, have siblings that have gone through it. But then there is certainly a blossoming market that I think is well needed to help players navigate this. We try to do our best when we're recruiting someone to kind of talk them through it because we do this all the time. But I think on the flip side of it, there are some great resources out there through these different companies that can kind of help you navigate and even just, again, try to decipher the communication. Because I think a lot of coaches aren't trying to be rude, but you've got to read between the lines sometimes and know, like, am I really being recruited by this place, or are they just sort of getting back to me?
I got it. So talking about the transition between high school and college, it's a massive transition. I did it myself, from high school to playing Division I soccer. And it's tough mentally, physically, and, on the field, off the field. How do college teams help players with that transition?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it's, within the team, we try to build that good culture of like, our seniors are always going to be our leaders, but, can they have this welcoming environment, remembering that, hey, a couple years ago, they were in that same exact situation. So I think it first starts with the dynamic and the team culture. And then I think, myself and my staff, we just try to make sure we're really paying attention to the first years, especially those first few weeks of school, checking in with them a little bit more often. Fortunately, at Notre Dame, we have an entire office called Academic Services for Student Athletes that, as a freshman, you have a study hall. So there's a person that we work with that works with a couple of teams that's really on top of our guys, academically. And then also unique to Notre Dame is we're really a residential campus. So then you've got the support of your coaches, your teammates academically, and then you have in your dorms, you have the rector, assistant rectors that are really there checking in on all the guys, especially the first years, and kind of creating that same team culture within the dorms. And so you do your best to give them that support, because I think the challenge is always going to be there, but I think the better support and more effective support we have, the more people are going to succeed in meeting that challenge, because it's never going to be easy, but we can maybe help set people up for success a little bit more.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. And I think a lot of the success of the players that I've seen, that I mentor, and that I've played alongside with, it all comes from home, right? And having that positive structure from home.
exactly.
So what advice would you give like parents in the college recruiting process? Like, what would you say that they can do to be supportive while also not getting in the way and letting their kids develop and go through this process themselves?
Yeah, I think the best thing that, because I'm a parent myself, and it's one of the biggest challenges when you love your kids is like, how much can you do for them versus how much can you kind of help them? And I think, something I've been thinking about a lot recently is like, for us that are kind of helping younger people, how much can we take this sort of mentor mindset of like, okay, we're not going to do it for them. We're also not just going to say like, I don't know, go figure it out. So how can, as we talked about to start the conversation is like the fit. As a parent, can we help them start to like sort of navigate that fit and marry it with their dreams that they have, and really start to help them think? Because I think sometimes when you're young, it's hard to think too far in the future, but when we get a little bit older, the future's there a little bit more often. And so I think we can really help them sort of think, okay, well, why do you want to go there? What do you want to get out of that experience? Because you've just had a little bit more experience. But I think kind of that mentor mindset. And then I think it's the challenge of just, then are you checking in? You're like, okay, hey, did you reach out to this coach? Yeah. Well, let me see the email. Can you help them with that? So you're sort of just there as this guide and this mentor helping them navigate this world, because you're going to know your kid better than anyone else. And so I think you've got to help them through that process, but you've also got to fight that urge sometimes to just do it for them, knowing that part of the process of growing up is, kind of trial and error.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, in different parts of the country, there's different circumstances. And one of the biggest topics within parents is which leagues and which clubs to play for.
Yep.
So, you as a soccer dad, right? How do you navigate which clubs and which leagues, and how do you choose the club that your child is going to play for?
Yeah, exactly. I think the two words that I think of a lot are like kind of preparing. And so that means like, are you getting better as a soccer player? Is it preparing you for that next? And then positioning, where do you want hopefully to go? And is the club providing you with those opportunities? Now, outside of that, there are, ID camps and different things that you can go to kind of take that into control yourself. But I do think it's like, you want to be preparing. So is it a coach that you feel is improving you? Are you, in a training situation, in a game situation where you feel like you're being challenged, you're getting opportunities, and you're growing? And then I think, is it positioning you? Like, is the league, a place where college coaches come in and watch? Are they playing in showcase tournaments? Are they getting you in front of places? And so I think, really focusing on those two things, to think, what's my daily environment? Am I enjoying it? Am I growing? Is it preparing me? And then is it positioning me for success based on where, what success looks like for me in that next step?
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk to a lot of the parents who might not have that opportunity where they are. And like I said, the different circumstances, right? When I was growing up as a youth player, I was spoiled in that I didn't need to go to ID camps. I didn't need to go to showcases because my team was ranked third in the nation, and
Yep.
college coaches were showing up to my games no matter what.
Yep.
I had college coaches on the sideline every single weekend, and that's how I was able to commit to a
Yep.
Division I college my junior year. How important are the supplemental things like the ID camps, the showcases for players who just want that extra layer of exposure?
Yeah, I think they're huge. And I think, every year at Notre Dame, we find someone we didn't know at one of our camps. And I think, again, being in South Bend, it's something that my own kids and athletes in this area have to work through, because when you're not in close to a major metropolitan area, sometimes it's just, there's not, coaches aren't going to fly just to watch necessarily one team play. We've got a budget. We've got to go and see a few guys in a day. And so I think, that's where the beauty of the internet can be your friend. It's like, are you doing research on the universities? Can you get to their camp page? Are there, camps that you can go to where lots of universities are working them? And so I think it's just trying to, again, take that spirit of the entrepreneur and just say like, okay, can I do my research? Can I really get out in front of those guys? And then I think, there's that part of it of putting yourself out in front of coaches. But then if you feel like, man, I'm really need to grow as a player, that's where it does get tough. Because I think a lot of people think, okay, well, maybe I'll drive to this club a couple hours away. Maybe that's the answer, but it is hard to get better at playing soccer while you're sitting in a car. But maybe there's a men's league you can play in. Maybe there's, something. But I think that's where, it forces you to be a little bit creative, because just because you're not in Los Angeles, Chicago, Detroit, New York, New Jersey, doesn't mean you can't keep growing as a player, and find the right opportunities for yourself.
That's definitely a major point, right? These showcases and ID camps can be multi-purpose, right? ID camps don't necessarily just have to be for exposure. They
No.
can be for determining what skill level you're at. If D1 is really what you want. You get to talk face to face with coaches and really get a little bit of knowledge that maybe they wouldn't be willing to share over email, or, you know, now that you're there and they're kind of seeing how you're interacting, they might be a little bit more interested in you. How important is that face-to-face interaction and just getting more and more exposure in front of potentially your future college head coach?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing, you know, because I'm with you. What you said earlier is like, I think the ID part of it is part of it, but we, you know, myself, I always try to stress that, like, we're trying to create an experience where you're going to grow. You enjoy it, but you're going to grow as a person and a player in those couple days, because you're coming together, you're playing with, you know, it's like making the national team. You're going there, you're playing with a bunch of different people you don't know at that moment, and you're trying to figure out how do I perform at my best there. So that's what I love about these environments. But then, yeah, I think you just get to get a sense of how coaches operate. What's the intensity level? What are they looking for that you just can't get across in a phone call, in an email? And so I think those little touch points throughout those few days can be really valuable. It's something that I didn't have growing up. I grew up in Houston. There was no Division I schools around, really. You know, maybe every once in a while the SMU coach would be down, but you went to camps, but it was just with your club, and it was all just about, you know, skill development versus helping yourself get to college.